the Psychohealthology Summit 2018. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Dr. Eva Detko, and my guest for this session is Dr. Raphael Kelman. Dr. Raphael is a graduate of Albert Einstein School of Medicine, and over the past 2 decades, he's treated more than 40,000 patients, developing a global reputation for investigating the root causes of disease and pioneering the use of functional as well as microbiome medicine. Dr. Raphael draws on the latest research to address patients' biochemistry, metabolism, hormones, genetics, environment, emotions, and life circumstances to help patients achieve optimal health. He publishes and lectures all over the world, advocating for whole patient care and discussing his cutting-edge approach to curing illness through healing the microbiome. So Dr. Raphael, thank you so much for joining us here. Welcome to the Psychohealthology Summit.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you as always, and you are already contributing an awful lot of information and expertise that you have in this area previously, but we're going to have a bit more of an exploration, and we're going to go into the whole brain and the links between the microbiome and the brain today. So I was wondering whether you could start by talking about the growing crisis that we're currently experiencing in terms of brain health, because we cannot deny that there's certainly a crisis happening right now. And why is it that the drugs are not the answer to solving this issue?
Well, first of all, we have to understand, the whole idea of what is the brain, and what are the various variables that affect this brain. But I think, firstly, we have to understand that the awareness or conscious awareness and the tremendous flow of communication within us, that all healing and health and disease is so rooted in, we have to understand that brain is interconnected with our microbiome in the gut. And in fact, we can't possibly understand the brain without understanding the trillions of bacteria within us, called the microbiome, that, as we know now, outnumber our own cells. And they're really like they initiate the conversation within us between the brain and the microbiome and the rest of the body. If the body is actually using the microbiome as the funnel that gets to the brain. So all the communication ultimately goes to the brain, and then from the brain is countless or untold number of pathways, many of which are, maintaining balance, homeostasis, but also the idea of maintaining the dynamical state of the body. That it's actually not homeostasis, but it's really about potentially a constant state of growth and development way beyond what we have known to exist. We know that in the brain there's tremendous neuroplasticity. Our general health has the same thing. The entire body has this idea of plasticity and development. But the messages that initiate that flow of communication actually begin within the microbiome. And if we can possibly understand the brain, what the brain is all about, how we heal the brain, why there are so many problems related to the brain or the mind, whatever word you want to use, if we don't understand everything else, in order to understand what's going on from the neck up, we have to understand what's happening from the microbiome beneath the neck.
Yeah, and it's something that people would have heard before, referring to the gut as the second brain. That's been sort of around for a while, and it's just there's an incredible amount of communication going there and back, isn't it? It is like a two-way highway almost, isn't it? And of course there are obviously other organs involved, but there is just there's, as you said, there's just so much communication and signals and messages going on. And when we're talking about the second brain being the gut, we're really talking about second brain being the microbiome, isn't it, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's, again, to make it very clear, it was very good that we spoke about the gut-brain connection and all that, but that is the past. That's passé already. Now we have to understand that it's the microbiome brain connection. It's the microbiome body connection. It's the web and the scaffolding, this matrix within is created by bacteria, not the gut. The gut is way, way, way down the totem pole. It's the generator is the bacteria within us. Bacteria is a primordial force within us that has been here way before the gut and way before the brain. And it should no longer be called the gut-brain connection, but we should talk about the microbiome brain connection. Be very clear about that, because it's a different ballgame. You know, the gut-brain connection pales in comparison to the microbiome brain connection, because it all depends ultimately on the power of bacteria.
Exactly right. That's exactly what I meant. Because obviously the science in this area is continuously moving forward, and we are just discovering such a magnificent, wonderful things about this completely sort of the separate world within us almost. I mean, obviously we interconnected, but we never really in the past appreciated just how much we depend on the microbiome. We can't exist without it, in fact. So whether it's the brain or other parts of the body.
There would be no life on Earth if it wasn't for bacteria, period. There would only be rocks on Earth, nothing else, if it wasn't for bacteria. Because bacteria are responsible for the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle. Without carbon and nitrogen, you couldn't even have plants on Earth. Forget about reptiles and fish and birds and zebras and hippopotamuses and humans. Impossible. It wouldn't exist. So, you know, and the bacteria, not only did they play such a profound role as the foundation of the life that emerged, but they even did something even greater for us. They actually went into our cells to give us the powerhouse, the energy that our cells create. The mitochondria within our cells, where energy is produced, the gasoline, the engine of every cell, that's bacteria. They actually, look what they did for us. They said, well, we're going to help you guys out. We're going to be your energy generators. So life will emerge at a rapid pace, because they had that so-called intelligence, and it's a word that I use with not with caution, but purposely, because the bacteria on Earth, they are a complete super intelligent conscious organism, because the amount of bacteria on Earth in mass, I may have said this the last time we spoke, but it's worth repeating. In mass, it's greater than the mass of all the fish in the sea and the animals on Earth. It's so incomprehensible that the brain can't digest it. Therefore, what are we talking about? I mean, and we can't see any of it. But even more shocking than that is they work as one organism. The bacteria in Uganda do not have a different agenda than the bacteria in London. You know, they have the same agenda. The bacteria in France, in Caen, doesn't have a different agenda than the bacteria in South Africa. They have the same agenda. And that is to work together with a certain awareness to do something. There's a concerted effort to do something. In this case, to start the cycle of life. I mean, not a pretty important job, wouldn't you say, that they have. And they're working together to be the foundation and the generator and the engine that that caused the life to catapult life as we see it in all its diversity. But let's go high on a mountain and see the big, big picture. See where we're coming from. What is this? We see a plant or a tree or a fish or a child well, where's this coming from? We start asking questions like this, we're going to get back to the bacteria. We'll get there. And then our eyes will see the unseen world, which we're now able to see that now. And we're going to see this incredible organism called the superorganism of bacteria. That what's the definition of consciousness, right? The ability to communicate. Bacteria communicate with each other in ways that is just mind-boggling. They could communicate from one point of the globe to the other instantaneously. They transfer genes amongst each other. They communicate electromagnetically. They communicate the same way the brain communicates. In fact, the brain communicates the same way, in a similar way, but nothing, it's like a reflection of the way bacteria on Earth communicate. They could shuffle genes. They can transfer genes to each other. It's just incomprehensible the way they communicate. It's very important to state all this, because if we don't appreciate this context, no one's going to believe me that the future and the present of medicine, of healing, lies within the power of what is already here.
What I find the most fascinating part of all of this is the collective intelligence and the collective consciousness. And it is totally mind-boggling. But now here is the thing. As I said at the beginning, we've got this epidemic of brain issues. Every second person is on antidepressants and has so many different other symptoms, brain fog, memory problems, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of those problems. So what is it that we're doing? We're doing something really, really wrong to this fantastic organism inside us, right? To cause those symptoms.
That's right. That's right. Because we have to think about, why is there disease in the first place, right? And again, we're going to have a radical revision in what we always thought to be true about why we get sick and this and that. And that is that, number one, is what we've been destroying in the last 150 years, what we've been destroying, and the attitude that came with it. It's the thought about what is it on Earth that is so harming to us is exactly what helps us. It's the thinking that creates the disease, There's some great books written about the health. There's one book in particular called The Health of Nations. I forget his name, maybe with an L, amazing book. And he shows that the real causes of the decline even in infectious diseases was not so much the antibiotics and all the vaccines, without getting into that controversy. Now, certainly it made a difference, but when you look, especially if you're living at that particular time when they first started using antibiotics and immunizations, but if you look at the big picture, that only contributed 3% in the overall improvement in health in our society. What was the biggest? The awareness. It was even beyond nutrition and beyond sanitation. It was the belief in ourselves, the belief that we're no longer susceptible to, demons out there that are trying to hurt us or give us disease, or that we're just helpless, in a random world that may just strike us and push us and cause all kinds of problems. But that we have power. We have the ability to develop ourselves, to feel strong about ourselves, that we do have great power to maintain ourselves, to improve our lives. And it was that way of thinking that we can be empowered, first in the belief in ourselves, that changed everything. It was that type of education that really began to change the trajectory of our lives. That being said, now we know that that's a key element for helping mental health today, is that to believe in ourselves, to believe in something great within each person and the power that each person could potentially have. Look at what this attitude did, how it changed the course of history. Not to be fooled by this drug and this antibiotic and this vaccine and this procedure and that procedure and this nutrient and that nutrient and this supplement and that supplement. No, it's the human will that made all the difference. So again, when you look from a big view, now you begin to see, well, really, what are the causes? What is it that we really need as human beings to experience for good health, mental health, physical health? And I'm talking about physical diseases, whether you call it depression or anxiety or OCD or ADD or ABC or CDF. It doesn't make a difference what you call it. The lack of vitality and lack of meaning. Look, we see so many of these killers, they wouldn't even classically define them as depressed. So how do we measure this pathology that we're talking about? Not with the instruments that they use, that psychiatrists, psychologists, and doctors use to understand what is health and what is disease. We need a new matrix, a new algorithm. Otherwise, we're not going to understand why kids are so violent. And maybe they've even been to psychiatrists and there's no history of depression. So my point is that we need to really understand what's going on within the human being. What is it that we need and that we're lacking? And what is it, not just here, but something very primordial that we're not fully experiencing? And yes, I'm saying that it's this will in a power within ourselves to create, to contribute, to help ourselves, to build our own lives, and most important, to help the other. That's all within us. Now, how is that related to the microbiome? Well, first of all, we see that the true causes of disease is not what we thought they are. Certainly not genetics, right? Certainly not nutritional deficiency. So everything that holistic functional medicine will tell you, that's all much higher level than what we were taught before, that health and disease, health is just the absence of certain diseases. True, functional medicine, is so much beyond, but what's coming is so much beyond that. My point is that health and disease comes from some altered state within us, and it's not just from the neck up. One is this breakdown of the will and the belief in ourselves and the belief of the power of a collected entity, like bacteria on Earth, the belief that we're greater when we are helping the other selflessly, like bacteria. We are greater, but not to do it because we want to be greater, but to do it because that's our true nature. That's what's going to begin to change everything: mental health, physical health, depression, anxiety, you name it, and everything in between, neurological diseases. Now, I'm not trying to minimize the how all these diseases seem to be so rooted in certain biochemical pathways. But what people don't realize now is that the deepest biochemical pathways is microbiome. And microbiome bacteria is primordial. What's wrong with the microbiome? What's gone awry with our microbiome? What's amazing is it's not just that it's not getting the right foods, even though I wrote a book called The Microbiome Diet. It's more than that. It's what we're experiencing. And now the research is showing that adverse childhood experiences affect us and affect the microbiome, which in turn will affect Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, you name it. Any neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's and dementia of all sorts, of coronary artery disease, of cancer, everything is rooted in our experiences that started in utero. Or let's put it this way, right after birth. Let's leave whatever before that. I'll leave that to another conversation. Everything is rooted there. And guess what? Where are those emotions harbored? Where are those experiences harbored? In this primordial soup we call bacteria that we're part of. That is nature. The nature of nature. You want to know the nature of nature? Learn bacteria. Understand bacteria, because we are bacteria, and bacteria are us. We are these cells, whatever you want to call them. I don't know. The word bacteria should change, because we think of bacteria and the brain just comes up with some crazy negative ideas. We should change the name, because our neurons, what we think is our brain that needs to be healed, right? Because we have all kinds of neurological problems and psychiatric problems and all kinds of neurodegenerative disorders, etc. But first we have to understand what are the neurons, what are bacteria, and then we'll see that the neurons are like our bacteria. Not the other way around, that, oh, look, bacteria are like our neurons. No, the primordial stuff of what we're made of is not our neurons. It's something before that. You want to call it bacteria? That's who we're part of. And our memories and our experiences that are not the best experiences we could experience, if they're not like those experiences that we had at the time when our health as a society began to change, meaning we felt empowered, a will within us, a will to live, a will to develop, a will to create, a belief in ourselves, in our will to act, to do, to change. That's what needs to be tapped into. Just like we've done so much collectively, we could now begin to tap into it now by telling people that we have that power. And then we'll be more careful with how we treat children. Adverse childhood experiences and even the lack of the right types of positive experiences will be remembered by bacteria within us. The research is clear about that. Adverse childhood experiences, whether it's emotional trauma, God forbid, any of the type of trauma, but even the lack of what we really need, which we don't yet, we're not talking about it, will lead to changes in the microbiome. When there's changes in the microbiome, then we will, maybe years later, maybe earlier, will develop great chance of developing depression, anxiety, ADD, you name it, and physical diseases. The research is there. The chances of autoimmune disease skyrockets with adverse childhood experiences. We have to shift everything we thought we knew. We have to shift our way because of everything, because everything's changing. We have to change our orientation to what are the tools we're going to use to help people heal today, and what is the true idea of preventative medicine.
Yes. And indeed, this is why throwing antidepressants and medications at people is never, ever going to heal anyone. And this is very, very right, that if we want to look at true healing, we need to be looking at how, let's say, traumatized our microbiome is, and therefore what's sitting there from very, very early on. And as you said, obviously, the particularly the first formative years of our lives, we are just so susceptible to interpreting experiences oftentimes in negative way. And what you're referring to as well was the developmental and attachment trauma. And that's from sort of 0 to 4 years old. And this is a really big one, because often people don't talk about it and they don't recognize it, because the developmental trauma is often about what's missing, not so much big traumatic things that did happen, but it's about things that didn't happen, right? That's the thing here. That's why it's so difficult sometimes to pinpoint.
I call it the disease of absence. It's exactly what you're saying. It's the lacuna in the text. It's the absence. of something that's so blatant and glaring in retrospect. And it's like water or sunlight to a plant. Imagine, and this we weren't aware of, we didn't understand. But look, the future is different because this is what we're going to be teaching. This is what we're going to be educating. This is the true preventative medicine. So it's going to be good. You know, the next generation, this generation, that we have new ways of understanding, and the humans that are going to develop will not only be stronger mentally and psychologically, but also the physical health will be dramatically different. And it's not just because we're taking methylfolate or we're taking this or we're taking that. It's because of a different foundation, because of the experiences, the emotional experiences, the states of being experiences that is part and parcel with this foundational cells within us that you may want to call bacteria, or you may want to call it something else. But just remember, it's within us, and it can change. But the key word to understand, to start thinking about methods and modalities of healing, is to think about the will of bacteria, the power and the will of bacteria, the same will that we've experienced as society, from the change of no technology, science was not developed, to where we were, to the point of 50, 75 years, that big change. And the common denominator, really, why health improved so significantly, is not because of the drugs or vaccines or anything else, but is the change in the belief in ourselves. And it's that there's biomimicry to bacteria, in the sense that at our core is a great power, a great will, a will for life, a will to nurture, a will to maintain, a will to build, a will to grow and develop, a will of tremendous, of activating neuroplasticity, so to speak. But also beyond that, the true will to help others, to be part of a whole, that's something that's so far greater than anything we may experience ourselves. Look at bacteria. One bacteria by itself is nothing, is stupid, right? It's virtually lack of any intelligence, so to speak. But when they all get together as one, each bacteria is pretty happy to be part of that one superorganism. Humans should take note and to understand the concept of biomimicry.
It's very interesting, because in functional medicine in particular, when people are talking about microbiome and they're talking about nurturing and healing the microbiome, they usually mean taking probiotics or eating probiotic foods. And of course, that's all very, very important. But we are not talking enough about healing the microbiome that has imprinted trauma from our early years in it. And of course, if we were to be a little bit more receptive to that, then yes, of course, we can achieve a lot with nutrition, and we still obviously should be feeding a microbiome the right foods, etc. But we also need to be thinking how we're going to nurture our microbiome and heal the microbiome from the imprinted traumas in the early years. I think, honestly, I completely agree that if people change their thinking and the mindset to think, how do we heal and nurture the microbiome more holistically, not just by giving it fermented foods and probiotic foods, but actually more holistically, I think it is a complete game changer, absolute game changer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wrote a book on the microbiome diet, but really the diet really is the hunger for meaning. What we need at our core is our lives of meaning and purpose, and it's not synonymous with accomplishments just for oneself. It's not in any way even associated with happiness. It's associated more with meaningful experiences. And there's been research to show this, that to clearly delineate the difference between to feel a life of meaning, experiences of meaningfulness, versus happiness. And they're not the same. But they're difficult to tweeze apart. So the whole idea of the science of happiness is not the same as the science of meaning. And one is much more powerful and more related to physiological health than the other. And again, there's research to support that too, when they were like showing the different groups, two different groups. One were experiencing what they associated with just being happy. The other one associated with experiences of meaning. Those who had the experiences of meaning had more positive physiological, immunological changes than those who were just experiencing the so-called state of happiness. They're not necessarily the same. So we have to feed human beings the foods that they really need. And folks, it's not just inulin and arabinogalactan, those nutrients that I wrote about in the microbiome diet. We need to edit that book. In fact, when people say to me, "Oh, I want to read that book," I said, "Why would you want to read that? It's already fiction. You know, it's you need to go further. The true food, what we're really hungry for, and what our bacteria need, what we need, what life needs, is meaning and purpose and unity and interconnectedness, selflessness."
You see, this is why I really like talking to you about this, because when people talk about the microbiome, there are literally, I don't think there is anybody else, or maybe there are, but not that I've come across, who will be talking about life purpose and meaning as a very sort of strong connection in terms of making it all come together. Yet, sort of not in the context of the microbiome, people of course talk about meaning and purpose in, you know, when they talk about spirituality and stuff like that, but they don't make that connection to the microbiome. And that's a very, very interesting thing, because when I work with people with autoimmunity, oftentimes this happens so often that when people are really sort of in the thick of it and they have a lot of symptoms and they actually are really, really sick, they often are confused about the identity, the meaning, and the purpose. And so that is very, very interesting that when people finally become clear about those things, they get better, right? And that
Absolutely.
will be regardless of other things that they're doing, nutritionally or otherwise.
And, you know, and it works both ways. At times, it's the right thing to do just to focus on changing the bacteria, using pre and probiotics. Sometimes it's the right time just to focus on that. It really is the skill of the healer to know when to use this modality or that modality, how to blend them. But it's also the case that if you follow some of the principles that I call microbiome medicine, you can begin to change the emotions by changing the microbiome through other aspects of microbiome medicine, whether it's the right type of diet, understanding the effects of certain medications, understanding the effects of, let's say, negative emotions, understanding the effects of the lack of the right types of foods. All of that can also, interestingly, can begin to change the emotional state as well. So that's why I talk about the ways to heal adverse childhood experiences is one, actually by changing bacteria. It's amazing. And then it won't change the past, but it will change our experience of the past. It will change the way we're experiencing the moment, because we're going to use the past and intertwine it with the future to create a different moment, so that we feel better in that moment. Why? Because we're using the negativity of the past. We're able to rise up and use it to make our future better, to transform the future. So these two pathways, one is, you know, awakening the will within us and realizing that what we've come from is sometimes the necessary resistance, so to speak, the necessary platform, the necessary springboard to create greatness in our lives in the next, how we're going to transform our future and our present by what we've experienced. Because we believe, we've learned to tap into a great power within and a belief within, and then that begins to change and begin to heal adverse childhood experiences. Very powerful. Very powerful.
Absolutely. And so, it absolutely works both ways. That's the beauty of it. And everything affects everything else. So then you can get on this upward spiral. Oftentimes when people get into the sort of deepest, darkest depths of, depression or whatever other symptomology, they've been on this downward spiral, and they've sort of been, the microbiome may be affected negatively by a trauma, but then, of course, then they feel depressed, so they don't eat the right food, so they don't feed the microbiome. And so it kind of goes on and on and on.
Exactly.
Spiral. So the same way, right, you can get on the upward spiral.
We always have to restore hope that the good light will emerge out of all this horrible darkness. Because if you don't believe in the power of the goodness, the power of something so good, then all bets are off. You're not going to heal. You're not going to get better. In fact, your will for life will just atrophy. And with that, diseases begin to show. But we're not going to realize that it's the decline in the will that preceded the decline of everything else, And again, I'm speaking very broadly, right? There's always unique situations, but there's also a collective will, right, that we've all participated in. And that diminution of something that we could potentially activate to reach great heights affects everyone. Now, for one person's biochemistry and genetics, the outer physical so-called poisons and ecology will affect one person more than the other. But overall, the foundation of our health and healing is the inner ecology of meaning, the inner ecology of the real nutrients that we need, that life needs. And it's a certain understanding of what is operating within this picture called life. What are those forces that are truly at the root, not just within us, everywhere? I mean, we're part of nature, and nature's within us. What is it at the core that we need to be focusing on in order to really heal mental disease today in society, to the unbelievable decline in mental health, and then the incredible epidemic of depression and anxiety and ADD, ADHD, and all kinds of neurological issues, and the incredible acceleration and incidence of autoimmune diseases, of inflammatory diseases, of cancer, cardiovascular diseases. Yes, the cynics out there will say, well, look, it's rooted in this and rooted in that. But look what that's rooted in. It's all rooted in something so much deeper. And that's where the changes need to be made, because when we improve this foundation of who we are, we're not going to be as susceptible to all these diseases, including infectious diseases. And that will be also the foundation that will help us heal from all these diseases. Listen, that's not to say, by the way, that we're not going to need medications, we're not going to need technology, we're not going to need functional medicine, we're going to need it all. The reason why I'm moving to that extreme is because I want to bring us back to middle ground, that we need some combination, but first we have to go radical. Even if it means that I'm going to be looked at as a fool, that, what is he talking about? This is not science. It's ridiculous. You're not in the real world. I'm willing to get that type of negative criticism if in any way it's going to bring us to the middle path of awareness and understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It is about the balance. It is about utilizing and bringing all of those things together. But you're quite right. What needs to happen first is a major change in our awareness and in our thinking and the mindset surrounding not just brain health problems, but just health overall.
This is really what people need to hear, what children are craving for, but no one's giving it, no one's feeding them this.
Yes, and this is also the difference between just absence of symptoms and actually thriving and enjoying optimal health. There's a big difference between that. And you were talking about, we need to restore hope, and I think that's really, really key. And what is really great to know for people is that when we reach out and start thinking we want to heal our microbiome, we want to nurture, we want to have this sort of relationship that is obviously, just goes far beyond just taking probiotics, which is important, but we're talking going beyond that. The microbiome responds really quickly. That's what I wanted to stress, that you don't have to wait years for those positive changes to occur. Sometimes it can respond so very quickly, in a matter of days, sometimes in a matter of hours.
People can look up on the reviews on Amazon about the first book on the microbiome called The Microbiome Diet. Watch what people say. Listen, it's unbelievable. I was surprised myself that I'm not treating these people, and all they're doing is the microbiome diet. And it's amazing. They'll tell you, read about it, about their changes, their brain changes. Forget about the fact that so many have lost weight and this and that and feel better and in so many ways and heal this and heal that. But you could see that their brain changed. Their brain is no longer hijacked by a diet that was leading them to feel unhealthy. So yeah, it's absolutely true that the changes could be rapid, really rapid. It's incredible. See, healing ultimately really is a change, a new orientation within ourselves, either in relationship to others or in relationship to ourselves. And you could use this definition from the very biochemical level to the highest level, whatever you want to call it. What does that mean? In the sense is that when you change your orientation to others, your ability to relate to others in deeper and more profound ways, or meaningful ways, you're healing, right? And the same thing with the way you relate to yourself. If before you related to yourself in negativity, that I have no power, that I'm useless, I'm depressed, you start thinking of yourselves like grasshoppers, like nothing, and because we're led to believe that we're not good, or we're not good enough, or our individual uniqueness was blotted out. So, when we begin to experience ourselves differently, that's healing. That's a profound healing. You can look at it biochemically too. When this biochemistry interacts with that biochemistry and it's changing, so there's something different within us, right? But on a higher level, we could be dying of a disease and die, but yet in the process, we're also healing to the last moment because we're now older, God forbid, we're sick, we have limitation, but we found something that brings us higher than that limitation.
This is a fantastic conversation, and I am really hoping that if people haven't already been thinking along those lines, they are really now challenging their own approach to this. And so I wanted to ask you before we finish, obviously we said a lot of things in terms of how to heal and the different approaches, but could you summarize your top strategies for looking after nurturing and healing our microbiome?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, to believe in yourself, believe in your uniqueness and your power, and that even though you may have had adverse experiences in your childhood, it can be healed. You can heal it, and it can actually be used as a springboard for your greatness to come. Because everything that we've experienced, there's a purpose, and use that to make your life even greater, to realize that, you're amazing, you're incredible, you have a life force within you. If you don't see it, realize we're all part of nature, but look at the power of nature. Look at the power of bacteria. It's also within you, within us. It's not different from the so-called more practical, if you want to call it, or superficial or biochemical, or it's all the same. This is really like a seamless tapestry between taking a nutrient and taking advice or taking this to heart. It's all part of the same thing. It's a unitary healing. The bacteria within us, this big ecology within us, needs a certain lifestyle. It needs certain foods. It needs the types of foods that I outline in the whole brain, and what foods we should not be eating or eating less of, and what are the potential side effects of drugs like overuse of antibiotics and even pain medication. Now they found that long-term use of narcotics adversely affects the microbiome, which then leads to neuropsychiatric diseases. So in a good history, we have to ask, have you been using narcotics, not because of maybe medications that were given to you for a protracted period of time? That can have an adverse effect on the microbiome, which then can affect our neurochemistry, psychiatrically, but also neurological disorders. So, on a very practical level, both angles are practical, is heal the microbiome, understanding the forces and the causes that are bringing it down, and work hard to improve our inner ecology with the right type of diet. All of this is part of one healing, and that's the healing of our deepest self.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that summary. What I love what you said, we're looking at the bacteria as a collective, sort of outside of us, and then we're thinking, wow, they're so powerful. This sort of collective organism is so powerful. But again, changing the thinking to, hang on a minute, but this collective organism is us and we are it. It's such an integral part that if it's so powerful, then therefore that power is within us too. I love that. That's really great.
That's it. I'm glad you have this recorded, because that's it. Disseminate that. Perfect. That's it. Again, what you do is you're awakening the self-worth and the power within people. That goes a lot further than an antidepressant. It goes a lot further than a probiotic. That's the pill. What you just said is the pill. That's the pill.
Yes, we should bottle that.
I'll buy a lot of those bottles.
Great. So excellent. It's a very sort of thought-provoking maybe conversation for some people, but it's just so important that we have a different mindset and we have a different way of thinking. From the old way of thinking is obviously not working. We can see that everywhere. This epidemic of all sorts of diseases and problems, as we said. So it's the old way of thinking is not working, and this is just something that we need to come around to and start implementing as well, and start embracing. And I think genuinely, if people do that they will see very, very positive benefits to their lives and to their health. So that's really, really great. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of this. Is there anything else that you want to share about your project, project's work, anything else at all?
Yeah, the new book that's coming out is kind of a revision of the whole brain. It's a different book, but I'm forgetting the title already. It's something about using the power of bacteria. Yeah, it's the using the power of bacteria. It's really, again, it's kind of similar to what we're talking about understanding the power of bacteria to help heal the brain and to help heal the body. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different than the whole brain, but there's a lot of overlap.
So listen, thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's worth it. Anytime. We'll be in touch.
Great. Thanks again. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for